Hi, welcome to the small shed. This week I'm making a start on putting the Cyclekart together. See you in a minute. Now for a long while I've been putting bits together, assembling sub-assemblies and all sorts of things like that, but we've not actually got a lot of progress made on putting the thing together. There have been two reasons for that. Partly is waiting for parts, and that's been something that's been an ongoing thing as you start and build. For instance, the front axle, you get some parts and then you find you want some more, and so that takes a while, and the thinking about and the planning side of it also takes a few weeks. But up until now I've also had the stumbling block that I mentioned in one of the very early videos about not having anywhere to build it. And although I'd mocked up a couple of times in the conservatory, that's not really much of an option, because even if I assembled it in there I wouldn't be able to get it out through the doors. So I've reached the point where I couldn't do anything without sorting that out. Now some people build outside, people have been known to do that, and it's a perfectly viable option. It's just that we've just been going through fairly heavy winter, so I didn't really want to be outside doing it out there, so I've gone for a route that I was thinking about fairly early on, which is putting a platform over my trike that is substantial enough to be able to build a cart on top of. And whether or not I'll be able to get it off afterwards is sort of irrelevant at the moment. I'm more interested in being able to put it together and see how things work, indeed if they work. So let's go into the garage and we'll see what we've been up to there. That's probably occurred several weeks ago on the actual small shed videos that I've been doing, and you can see the platform I've built and how we're going to go about putting the thing together. So this is the temporary workbench I've got for assembling the cart. Solid enough, it should be able to take the weight without any great problem. It's got fairly substantial legs all bolted to a frame that's attached to the sort of runners that the car is rolling on. It's got a trolley with some casters on it, so it's tied into the car. It's not going to rock about or anything, and this is its temporary home for the time being anyway, so at least we can get on and see how things will go together. And even if we have to unbolt it and do stuff outside later on, at least I'll know that it all fits together. I'm going to bring the chassis in and put the rails on, because they still need trimming to length anyway, and try and put the front end together and see how that goes, and see if all the maths and planning and thinking comes to anything or not. And once that's done, I can worry about getting the back axle in and seeing how we mount the motor and get things like that sorted. I want to just start from, if you like, a datum of where I hope the chassis will end up, which is somewhere around 100 mil off the ground. I've got some blocks of timber that have been left over from making the frame. Those come out at 90, I think, at the moment. So I'll put the chassis up onto those for the moment till I get the front spring and front axle on. And at that point I can think about whether I want to change that to a bit more or a bit less with packers or taking bits out. And I think as a starting point 100 mil ground clearance should be reasonable. We'll just get the chassis in, see what it looks like. The only problem with the aluminium is that it's slippery. the spring. At the moment I'm just going with the single leaf, or maybe two. We'll worry about whether that's strong enough later. Maybe we need more leaves on the spring. Similarly, all the bolts at the moment are just going to be random collections of bolts that are vaguely appropriate until I finally get it to a point where I'm happy with it, and then I'll source proper strength bolts for everything. This is more of an exercise to see if it works, if you like. One thing I haven't yet resolved is the spring hangers, because I didn't know how long they were going to be in practice. I knew how long they were going to be in theory, but that's not much good to anybody. So I'm just going to knock some temporary ones up out of aluminium because I haven't got the steel for that yet. But if we lift that by 10 mil, we're looking at something like 111 and a half, 115 mil hole centres, and then we can actually get the front of the chassis hanging off the spring, off the axle. I mean. Remember, this is not real, these are not the proper ones, so don't all have hissy fits. In fact, I might need to make them a bit shorter. This is where I start to find what bits I need, like spacers in the top or in the spring, because the axle's wider than the spring, so I'm going to need some spacers at the bottom. and it also shows me the extent of movement sideways of the chassis and whether or not I need a panhard rod to go from there to the chassis, or whether or not my radius arms will deal with that. And one of the things I couldn't see before, but I now can, is the relationships between where the radius arms come out of here down to the chassis. I've always assumed they'd be more or less in a straight line, but actually they're going down quite steeply. Once they're in, that'll tell me whether I need to do anything about that movement sideways. But that's a start. The front end is up on its wheels and independent of anything else, and we have some springing which is adjustable. And we've got something like the 6-degree caster, I think. We'll check that out in a minute as well. And again, I've got some adjustment with the radius arms as to how much caster I get in this whole system. Now I can start to have a look at what goes where and get some of the spatial sort of things sorted. The steering wheel will have to go back a bit because the radius arms or the steering arms will be coming more or less straight. Things like that I can now start and judge height and where that will be in relation to that, how much swing I've got when I do a turn, how much travel I need on the pitman arm, and how indeed we're going to secure the end of the column. And at this end there's a fair amount of bodywork got to come from here backwards, so that'll push the wheel back a bit, which will be good. And then the back end, I'm running at the moment about 85mm ground clearance at the front and 100 at the back, so there's a slight rake on it at the moment. which I'll probably keep, I don't know. I was thinking or hoping that that would only be 40mm, which is the depth of a piece of the aluminium 4040 section. Looks like it's going to be a bit higher. That is currently sitting at 80. So we maybe can use a bit of 80/40 on the top, I don't know. But I think we're sort of getting to somewhere that's useful to me now. I can start and plan a bit better. The front end seems to be okay. Obviously it needs a lot of alteration yet. I might make the spring hanger a bit shorter, and again that's the virtue of doing it temporarily, if you like. We can adjust things when we get a bit of weight on it. It's a bit soft at the front at the moment, so I may need to put the extra 3 or 4 springs in. But so far I am more than happy with the progress on that. The steering arms there are coming in quite high, which is again is good, because it means I've got good footwell room to get my feet in. It was always a worry that the steering column was going to get in the way, but in fact I think it's more or less running above where my knees will be, so that's good. So yes, it's only been an afternoon's work, but it really is starting to make a bit of a difference, and I can feel where it's going to go now. Get some idea of the size of the thing. Again, that's something I hadn't really got a concept of when it was on paper. Okay, so that's got me a lot further forward. It's only been an afternoon's work, but it's started to pull together all the components that I've been playing with for the last months effectively, and I can start and see in real time and real space how it all fits together, whereas looking at drawings and having half the parts, it doesn't really sort of do it. You can't really get a judgment on scale or size or spatially how things will work. I can now start and sort out things like the front steering shaft location, bearings and all that sort of thing, where the radius rods will go, where the steering arms will go and all that sort of thing. So it's been really useful afternoon. I've now got something that I can see that's physical in the garage, and that in itself is a bit of a spur to get things done. So I hope it was of interest. Look forward to seeing you next week. We'll be doing something different on the cart. I'll see you then. Bye.